As an MMORPG player, I have always loved running small group dungeons and games. Something about grouping up with your friends and taking on challenging bosses and getting loot from it to allow you to take on even more challenging fights is part of the magic that makes PvE MMOs great. So after hours of sitting in New World's evening queue each night, I realized I needed something else, and I happened to have been given a Fellowship key on Keymailer to try this out. Fellowship's design is intriguing. Basically, it's fast-tracking the dungeon running and skipping out on the MMO progression, giving you more time gearing your character and doing stuff you love as a PvE player. But after many run-throughs the various dungeons Fellowship has to offer, I do have conflicting feelings on this game. Keep in mind, Fellowship just entered early access and has a ways to go before we even reach an official launch. Because what's another unfinished game for me to get my hands on? It really seems to be a trend going on here on my channel or something. Anyways, starting off, because everyone always mentions it, Fellowship did have some server issues the first few days that may have discouraged people from checking it out. Endless queues, disconnect issues, no loot dropping from dungeons, and all of that wonderful stuff you can expect with servers when a new game launches. The studio behind Fellowship, though, did act fast and did a great job at communicating these issues on their social media platforms, which is a big win in my opinion. And beyond that first day, I haven't really had any issues getting in, which is great because, well, the game is growing. Its player numbers haven't dropped off, which tells me that there is in fact a very solid audience for this new take on MMO dungeons. When it comes to selecting your character, there are 9 hero classes you can choose from, 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 5 DPS. Setting you up for the holy trinity that you are used to. These heroes should feel pretty similar to the typical MMORPG player too. You have all of what you can expect: druid and priest-like heals, mage-like DPS, paladin and tank-type tanks, ranged and melee, the whole game is here. And these hero classes are very well thought out. Every class I played doesn't really seem to have any bloat or waste to it at the early levels. There is not a single ability on my action bar that I haven't found a situation for, and all of these classes have a good mix of single target and AoE abilities, some of which can be very situational based. The healers also have a good mix of DPS abilities and heal abilities, making it so you're not standing there doing nothing when nobody in your group needs the healing. Some of the heroes have a higher learning curve than others, but overall it shouldn't be hard for anyone new or old to dungeon running to step into. I do have some minor complaints to the way they did these hero classes though, because I am not a fan of hero classes, especially for a game that is heavily inspired on an MMORPG system. I want to be able to customize my character to my liking, and I'd rather have one human race with tons of customization than the 9 hero classes that you can't customize. It's even worse knowing that just about all of the gear you equip does not reflect on your character when you equip it. The only thing that does seem to reflect are some capes that show up on your back, but the rest of the armor doesn't change the appearance of your hero at all. This probably bugs me more than it should, as it's purely cosmetic and doesn't affect the gameplay, but I don't like it. The only way to alter your character's appearance is through skins, which can be purchased for real money or unlocked when you reach different milestones in your reward track. I personally am the type of player who wants to show the progress of my character visually, and this takes away from it, and I hope it's something that changes within the early access development, even though I imagine it'd probably be a ton of work for this small team to completely reinvent how heroes appear, so it's probably part of why they took this approach. The player hub itself does a good job at capturing everything you need in an MMORPG city for this game. Players running around that you can interact with, a place to store your loot, weapon and gear vendors, jewel crafting stations, weapon and gear upgrade stations, and most importantly, training dummies to test out your builds. It does a good job capturing that MMO feel of just standing around and waiting for queues to pop or for your friends to log on so you can get that group formed. Speaking of builds, the talent trees are very similar to the WoW Draenor/Legion era of talent trees, where every so often you unlock a new row of abilities. Some of these are passive changes to existing spells, while others are completely new, and you can pick 1 out of 3 per row, making it not too overly complicated in your choice. The flood of passives that you are used to finding in the actual talent tree will actually come from the gem system. Gems themselves have their own tree-ish like system. Each gem type, which there are 6 of, grants what is called gem power, and that gem power can can unlock different passes for your character. The more you get of that specific gem type, the more into that tree you'll go, which will really help you customize how you want to play. The dungeons are obviously where the real game is. When you first jump into the game, you will start out with quick play dungeons. This was putting you right into the queue in the lowest difficulty of dungeon to get you started gearing your character. As a new player, this is required as you need a certain item level to get into the real challenging dungeons. You'll want to run these a few times to get you started, and these go really quick. I think my longest run was probably 10 minutes. So when the devs say that you can jump in and out, they really mean it. These quick play dungeons reward 2 currencies from the final boss of each dungeon to get you started in gearing up: supplies and Mark of Fellowships. Take these things to the vendors in the hub, and then you can buy that basic level gear, so then you can dive into the first league of challenging dungeons. There are 4 different leagues to choose from: Contender, Adept, Champion, and Paragon. And in order to do the harder ones, you need to hit certain milestones in the easier ones and get certain gear level. Each league has 7 different difficulties, each getting harder and dropping better loot, along with various mutations being added to these dungeons as the challenge progresses. I do like that the currency that drops from these dungeons is actually account wide and not bound to that specific hero, so you can easily gear up a second or third hero to get back into the fight quicker and not have to waste your time in the entry level dungeons again. The dungeons themselves, well, I mean, some of them are interesting. Overall, though, I'm not impressed and I'm not disappointed. Sure, they have their own aesthetic and their own enemy types and own unique fight, but as somebody who loves WoW dungeon design and getting more into the complex dungeon design, they really don't do a good job bringing that magic in for me. I can't exactly place my finger on what's missing here, but they just feel off to me. They aren't really capturing me in a way that I tend to expect when running dungeons, but that doesn't mean they aren't fun, because they are, and I haven't really found one yet that I get into and think, ugh, not this one again. You will feel like you're in familiar territory though. It's your usual farm from point A to point B, going through trash mobs, avoiding trash mobs, and making your way to the boss as fast as possible. Not even a week later, I'm already finding myself in groups that are just looking to skip everything they possibly can to get to that boss, which I kinda was hoping wasn't going to be the case. I mean, they're 10-minute dungeon runs. It doesn't take that much time, so I don't know why we're rushing to the end already. But alas, I guess I shouldn't underestimate MMO players like that. The game itself is fun. I enjoy the quick dungeon runs, and I think the game does have potential to capture a specific audience of people who want that competitive, quick, challenging fight. What my concerns are though is, first off, is what happens when the population starts to drop off. The current setup will make it extremely hard for new players to get into the game later on. When there aren't a lot of people queuing up for that first tier dungeon, the queues are going to get longer, it's going to get more frustrating for players, and it defeats the purpose of the in and out dungeons. And you have to do those entry level dungeons as a new player because you need that gear score to progress. And I think this is going to be one situation that they're going to need to overcome. Second is the dungeon burnout. Dungeon running is fun to a point, but after a while, running through the exact same fights over and over and over gets a little stale, even with mutators added to mix up the challenge. Eventually, once you nail down a fight with your group, you can keep doing it over and over, and it just gets easier the better gear you get. What's great about dungeons in MMORPGs is you can go do something else when you get bored. MMOs have no shortage of content. Let's use WoW for an example because these are very WoW mythic based dungeons. If I get bored of doing mythics or I hit my lockout, I can go do battlegrounds, I can go do PvP arenas, I can go do world quests, I can hunt for collectibles, I can do numerous other activities that keep me in the game and keep progressing my character and prevent me from getting bored or burnt out on one specific individual piece of content. If I get to that point with running dungeons and the only thing there is to do is dungeons, I'm just gonna log off and play something else. This also makes me question why I would invest my time into running dungeons in Fellowship when I could log back into New World or World of Warcraft and put that time into progressing that character instead, doing the exact same thing. In order for Fellowship to keep players coming back, they need to keep the experience fresh for returning players. Fast-paced dungeons mean faster gearing and flying through the content faster too, which means they're going to run out of content faster and lead to a faster player drop-off. So this, I imagine, will be something that they need to figure out in early access. Can a small studio pump out enough content fast enough to keep the game interesting? One solution would be procedurally generated dungeons, which would keep the experience fresh and challenging, having players not feel burnt out as much because every time you step into a procedurally generated dungeon, it's going to be different. They could also add raids and larger scale content, but it's going to take away from that fast-paced experience they seem to be aiming for, but otherwise there isn't a ton of direction that they could go in here that kind of just sticks to this PvE dungeon running theme. But then again, the game costs $25, and I would say Fellowship is worth every penny on that. You get more than $25 worth of content out of this early access, especially if you're going to challenge yourself to get into those higher difficulty tier dungeons, and you are getting exactly what the developers promised you. You're getting fast-paced, challenging, wild-like dungeon runs that can be a ton of fun and have you keep progressing your character and progressing the difficulty in which you can take on these dungeons. And now I'm eagerly waiting for Fellowship to drop the roadmap to see what their plans are for early access and the direction they plan to take this game.